Imagine for a moment a big wall between two countries. It's not a real wall, but more like a wall of taxes. This is basically what a tariff is, a tax on goods coming in from another country. So, in 2025, former US President Donald Trump put really high tariffs on goods from China. Why? Well, he said it was to protect American businesses and jobs. He believed that China just wasn't playing fair in trade. These tariffs made Chinese goods way more expensive in America. For example, a phone made in China that once cost $500 in the US might now cost $600 or even more. Because of these higher prices, people started buying fewer Chinese goods. Trump was hoping this would force China to change its trade practices. The tariffs were a major escalation of trade tensions between the two economic giants. The US imposed a 145% tariff on most Chinese imports, which is honestly a staggering increase. This meant that Chinese businesses had to pay much more to sell their products in the US, making them far less competitive. Of course, China retaliated with its own tariffs on US goods. This quickly escalated into a kind of tit-for-tat trade war, with both sides imposing more and more tariffs. This trade war has hurt both economies and made businesses and consumers, well, pretty worried. The impact of the tariffs was immediate and, honestly, pretty severe. Trade between the US and China plummeted. Cargo shipments from Shanghai, which is a major port in China, to the US dropped by a staggering 60%. This meant that way fewer Chinese goods were being shipped to the US. This drop in trade was a clear sign that the tariffs were having their intended effect, to reduce trade between the two countries. However, this reduction in trade definitely came at a cost. The Port of Los Angeles, a major entry point for Chinese goods into the US, projected a 36% drop in shipments by mid-May 2025. This trade freeze had ripple effects throughout both economies. In the US, businesses that relied on Chinese imports faced shortages and higher prices. In China, factories that depended on exporting to the US suddenly faced a big drop in demand. The sharp decline in trade with the US hit Chinese workers really hard. Factories that once buzzed with activity just fell silent as orders dried up. Millions of workers in manufacturing, logistics, and export-driven industries faced layoffs. The Chinese economy, which was already grappling with slowing growth, was pushed even further towards uncertainty. Experts predicted that the tariffs could lead to the loss of 5 to 10 million jobs in China. This kind of job loss would have a significant impact on Chinese families and the overall economy. The situation was especially dire in industrial hubs that heavily relied on exports to the US. In these cities, factory closures became pretty commonplace, and unemployment just soared. The once booming manufacturing sector faced an unprecedented crisis. The Chinese government, facing mounting economic pressure, took steps to try to mitigate the damage from the trade war. The People's Bank of China, which is the country's central bank, cut interest rates to encourage borrowing and stimulate economic activity. In addition to these monetary policy changes, the Chinese government also announced plans to introduce new economic policies aimed at supporting growth and reducing the reliance on exports. These policies included tax cuts for businesses and increased infrastructure spending. Furthermore, China quietly started rolling back tariffs on some US goods, hoping to ease tensions and create an environment for negotiation. However, the future remained uncertain as the trade war continued to cast a pretty big shadow over the global economy.